G'day there. In this video, I'm going to show you what WSPR or Whisper is, what it's used for, and how to set up the software WSJTX to use the Whisper mode. So what is Whisper? Well, Whisper stands for Weak Signal Propagation Reporter, and it is a mode within WSJT, also known now as WSJTX, a program developed by Joe Taylor, K1JT. Now, originally this was released in 2008. It's one of the earlier modes that's available in WSJT. It used to be a standalone mode, actually, a program you could download Whisper by itself, but now it's all incorporated in WSJTX, of course. And what it is basically a beacon software. So you can send a beacon from your station, a transmission that is then received by other stations, and then they report that to the internet, and you can view it as on a map and also view the data in a database. So it's handy for finding propagation if the band's open on HF, or if you want to test an antenna perhaps versus another antenna, you can leave your beacon running and then see who receives you. I've used Whisper quite a lot over the last few years. I use it on 6 meters for sporadic E for testing when 6 meters is open, looking for that propagation. I've also used it occasionally on 2 meters as well. 2 meters, I use it for tropospheric ducting, but I've used it on HF as well. So I can test 10 meters, I can test different antennas. I see when the band's open on 20, who's hearing me. Do you guys use Whisper for testing new antennas or maybe just looking for propagation? Then let me know in the comments below. Okay, so let's have a look at WSJTX. I'm running version 2.3.1 and I've already got this set up running in the Whisper mode. So the first thing is that you want to set up your radio, of course, in the File and Settings menu. This will vary depending on what your actual radio is. So here in mine's the IC7300. I've done various different videos on how to set up your radio for WSJTX, so please check those out in the description below depending on what radio. I've done the 7300, the 991 and the 705 and a few others. So once you've set up your radio and it's connected to WSJTX, you want to go to the mode button here at the top and you want to select Whisper. And then you get this window which shows the Whisper view. But basically what I'm doing is I'm just receiving here on 6 meters at the moment. So we'll go through a couple of steps here. I'll show you some of the controls. So I like to set up my waterfall to show between 1400 Hertz and 1600 Hertz because that is the bandpass filter that Whisper uses. It uses a 200 Hertz chunk of spectrum. What I do is I set up my waterfall for bins per pixel set up to 1. I start at 1200 Hertz. I have an N average of 4. I use the Linrad waterfall and also set it to current. Now you can see here I've got my sliders. So my waterfall gain is 1 step up from default. My waterfall 0 is also 1 step up from default. My spectrum gain is 1 step down from default. And my spectrum 0 is about default. And I set the spectrum to 20%. And that gives me a nice indication here. And you can see here that signal's rather strong. I can see that easily. There's another signal here that's starting to pop up that will probably decode shortly. And I can already easily see that there's a signal there compared to the noise on the waterfall. So a couple of things when transmitting on WSPR. Usually when you first set up the software, you'll have 1500 Hertz as I've just shown and retyped in there. So you can change whereabouts in the waterfall here you actually transmit. So by default, it's 1500 Hertz. It's my recommendation to change this. Don't leave it at 1500 Hertz because if everyone transmits on 1500 Hertz, you're going to get a lot of clashes and a lot of signals are all going to be sitting on that same frequency. So I just go up 40 Hertz. You can go down 40 Hertz anywhere in that passband, but the key is to not be outside that 1400 to 1600 Hertz passband. So this number here in the TX box should be between 1400 and 1600. It's best to stay at least 20 to 30 Hertz away from each edge due to maybe inaccuracies in your radio. Your radio might not be right on frequency. So you don't want to set it, say, to 1410 Hertz, and then you realize that your radio is actually transmitting at 1380 and you won't be decoded. The software won't decode you. Transmit percentage. I usually set mine to about 20% when I know that the band is open and that there's a lot of activity, especially on 6 meters. I like to set it at 20%. That's roughly, I think, every 8 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes it transmits. You don't really need to go any higher than that unless you're doing specific testing with somebody on a specific frequency or band. On HF, I definitely wouldn't go any higher than 20%. 5-10% is sometimes a good thing if you're leaving it unattended overnight. But yeah, I generally would recommend no more than 20%. WSPR also supports band hopping. So what WS-JTX will do is change the frequency of the radio automatically, transmit for 2 minutes, and then move to the next frequency or the next band rather that you have chosen. Of course, you've got to make sure that you've got a multi-band antenna connected up to your radio or some way of switching between antennas. But you can transmit on multiple bands, and then that way you can go and check all the results later on and see where you've been heard. If you tick the band hopping button and then click on schedule, what this will do is we'll open up a schedule, and here you can tick what bands you want at what particular time of the day. So if I want day and night, and I want it on, say, 10 meters during the day, but I want it on 40 meters at night, then once it gets around to night, it will start band hopping between those two. You've also got the option here for uploading spots. So if you tick that, that will then upload every station that you receive to the central WSPR Net database, and I highly recommend that you do that because then other people can use that data as well as yourself to see what you're hearing or what you can hear. Prefer type 1 messages, and I'll read exactly what is written here. If you hover over anything in WS-JTX, it tells you a little bit of a description. So it says here, 6-digit locators cause 2 different messages to be sent. The second contains the full locator, but only a hashed call sign. Other stations must have decoded the first one before they can decode your call in the second. Check this option to only send 4-digit locators if it will avoid the 2-message protocol. So basically in WS-JTX, you can put your full 6-digit grid locator in for better resolution, but you don't really need to do that. You only really need to send the 4-digit locator. So I'd just recommend ticking prefer type 1 messages unless you have a need for otherwise. No own call decodes. So this might be handy if you've got multiple WSPR transmitters perhaps nearby on the same frequency, maybe different antennas. You can tick that so that the program will not decode your own call sign and you don't upload your own spot. So that's pretty self-explanatory. If we actually go to the drop-down menu here, you can see you can set what your transmit power level is. Now this is a reporting power level. You still have to set the power level on your radio. This is just what you're telling people. So just having a look here, it looks like ZL4JW has just been decoded. So you can see here UTC time. I received this signal at 0510 UTC, so a couple of minutes ago. The signal strength to me was -7. So that's quite a strong signal. In actual fact, if I had to turn the microphone up on the radio, you would have been able to hear it. WSPR can receive signals down to -31 dB. So that's right down in the noise. So yeah, -7 dB, strong signal. DT. Now DT is the timing difference, and I've covered this in previous videos before, but basically you need to make sure that the timing on your computer is synchronized. So I just run a little program here called NetTime, which is network time. All that basically does is just synchronize my computer's clock every 15 minutes to make sure that it is correct. So I'll put a link in the description below to NetTime. It's really easy to install and run. One thing, when I do use NetTime, I do go to settings. I set my update interval to 15 minutes so that it's constantly updating, and in actual fact, it looks like it hasn't updated since, no, last sync attempt was at 4:07, so it's been updating periodically. So I know that my timing is correct. If the DT is any more than 2 seconds or more out, then you also may not get decodes, or other people may not decode you. So the frequency that this was received on was 50.294556. So on 6 meters, the WSPR frequency is 50.293. So basically what's happening there is the frequency is up 1556. So drift. Now drift is the important one. WSPR has a tolerance of +4 hertz or -4 hertz. Now that's not a total tolerance of 8 hertz, but rather it can compensate for drifting 4 hertz up or 4 hertz down. If it drifts 5 hertz up or 5 hertz down, you won't get a decode. If it drifts any lower than 4 hertz, then you'll be fine. So just keep that in mind. Generally not too much of an issue on HF because most radios are stable enough that they won't drift any more than 4 hertz. But when you start to get up towards 6 meters, 2 meters especially, you start to get those drift issues. Many IC9700 users will know about the drift issues. But yeah, any more than 4 hertz and you won't get decodes. So I've got the call sign here. So again, ZL4JW is the call sign. His grid RE44. And he's reporting a dBm of 53. That seems a bit high. He's saying that that's 200 watts. So he's probably transmitting quite a bit of power. I'm not sure, that might be a mistake. But kilometers, 1,757 kilometers. So he's in New Zealand, not too far away from me. So you'll see here, this is an interesting little thing. So this is a very, very strong signal. And I reckon if you actually have a look, 1557, 1556 on the waterfall there. I think that's ZL4JW again, but the signal appears, you can see here that it starts off here. This should be a nice straight line, but by the time it gets towards the end, it's now several hertz lower. So I think that signal has not been decoded because there's been too much drift. So that's a good example of that very, very strong signal, but hasn't been decoded. So it's very important to make sure that your radio is stable enough. TX next. So if we click enable TX, this will not turn our radio on straight away, but it signals to the program that you've enabled the transmit. And if we click transmit next, once we get this bar to 120 seconds, so the end of the whisper cycle, which is every 2 minutes, then it will transmit. So we'll just untick that for now. You've also got the power slider here. Just make sure that when you're setting this, that you have the minimum amount of ALC required to get enough power out of the radio that you're putting when you put the audio in. Just make sure that that's not being overdriven. If you're halfway through a transmission cycle, you can click Halt TX and that will stop transmission straight away. There's also the tune button, of course, too, which is very handy for turning the radio on and doing tune-ups. The bar graph here on the left, I usually set mine when there's just background noise to 30 dB as recommended by WSJTX. So here at the moment it's in the green, so make sure that it's not in the red or that it's not in the yellow. Now if you like running FT8 but then you maybe want to use Whisper on the times when you're not near the radio, or if you just want to run it in the background, rather than changing the mode here between FT8 and Whisper, because what that does is it doesn't keep your waterfall settings and not everything's in sync. What I usually do is I go over to configurations. Now what I do is I set a configuration for Whisper and then I create a clone of that configuration and then I set it up for FT8. So if you actually have a look here, if I go down to FT8 and I go switch to, the program shuts down, program opens back up, and now I've got my FT8 view and you can see here my waterfall's completely different. My settings, all I got to do is just set the frequency, bang, and I'm good to go. So that's very handy to know configuration, so I can just go straight back to Whisper now and that will bring up the Whisper waterfall and the Whisper list of stations as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I've just clicked Enable TX and TX Next. So what's going to happen is the radio is going to start transmitting on the next cycle. There we go, we're now transmitting. We're going to do a transmission here on 6 meters and see if we're heard or not. So we've finished that transmission cycle now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the following website, whispernet.org. So this is the central database for Whisper. So if we have a look here, if I go to map, which is up here in the top right hand corner, you can see it brings up a map of the world. And currently here we've got some filtering that we can do on the map. Currently I've got it set to 6 meters, so I'm looking at the 6 meter band. We can also put in call signs. We can also center the map on a latitude or longitude. I've just got it set as default at the moment. And we can also set here a time period. So let's have a look at the last 30 minutes. So if we just go update, that will update the map. So here we are zoomed in on Australia. So you can see these lines being drawn between various stations. So you can see the paths that are currently being shown on 6 meters. So ZL4JW I know is down here in the South Island of New Zealand. If you click on that station, it pops up with a little text bubble here, and it says hearing VK7HH and also heard by VK7HH. And you can see here the line that is being drawn, as well as ZL shortwave listener / ZL4 VK7HH and also hearing VK7RML too as well. FK1TS here in New Caledonia, hearing VK2 IJM /2. So you get sort of the general idea just by looking here at the map of what paths are where. Now, if you click on database next to map up here, we get some more filtering, and this is where we can get some really good data. So if we select the band here, let's select 6 meters. Let's select my call sign. So only show spots of this call sign, VK7HH, only show spots reported by this call sign. So this will show not just only what I've heard, but also who's heard me. And it will also show in the last hour, 12 hours, 24 hours, week, or 2 weeks. So let's go last hour, and I'm going to sort by time stamp. So if I click update, here we go. So we could see that last transmission, which if we go back to Whisper here, was at 0530, transmitting Whisper 0530 UTC. Shortwave listener ZL4 heard me at +2 signal to noise ratio, which is quite strong, at a distance of 1916 kilometers, and ZL4JW -8. So you can see here a few things. So 4 minutes previous, I was hearing ZL4JW because that's the call sign here, and here's the reporter. At -6, he heard me at -8. So we kind of have about the same signal strength between. So I mentioned before about drift. So I have received ZL4JW with a 4 hertz drift. However, he's heard me at a -1 hertz drift. So, both decodable, but just something to keep in mind. Other cool things that this does too is it will show the grid square with the full 6 digits, because the WSJTX software, when it is set to upload spots, it does upload your grid square. It uploads your 6-digit grid square. So you can get a bit of an accurate kilometers. So you can find out how far away the station is. It also gives you an azimuth. So that's something that's handy if you do have a directional antenna and you look at the data quickly and you say, oh, okay, 6 meters is open to ZL. I need to beam at 106 degrees. I know my Yagi antenna outside's not beaming at 106 degrees. He's still hearing me. But if I move my antenna around towards 106 degrees, then he should get a lot stronger. One thing to keep in mind, if you do select a band such as 40 meters and you click update, you will get a maximum number of spots has been reached, which is 500 on the map, because some bands are really popular, 40 meters being one of them, and the map does load quite slowly. You can see here there's quite a lot from East Coast US over to Europe. And there is a sea of call signs in here, so it's very hard to pick out who's who. Let's just see here if we can pick one that's got quite a few stations. Let's have a look. I can't quite. Here's one. Here we go. 4Z4TJ. If we just put his call sign in and click update, there we go. Then we get his spots. So he's basically being heard in pretty much half of Europe and a little bit in the East Coast of the United States. So that's another handy thing to know. You'll notice when I loaded my map that the Google Images map loaded correctly. If you see this and it says this page cannot load Google Maps correctly, don't worry about it. It's because of the changes that Google API made, that Google made to the APIs. You can still navigate the map fine. The map just doesn't load all that well. You can see it's for development purposes. You've still got the overlay. There is a fix if you go into the WhisperNet forum. There is a fix in there on how you can set up a Google API and use it. But I just thought that I would also point that out, that if you get that error message, that it's nothing to worry about. So that's Whisper. If you would like to learn more about the popular FT8 digital mode and how to go from a novice to a pro, then click on this video over here. I'll see you over there. 73 for now. Thank you for watching.